Hi, everyone. I'm Izzy. I will be moderating this mentorship hour. And we have a few people who are joining us virtually. And we have three individuals who are here in person. So, first off, because we have six folks with us, I'd like for all of you to introduce yourselves. So, I will start with those who are in person, and then we'll move to those who are joining us virtually.
Hello, I'm Amin Karbasi. I'm a professor at Yale University and also a research scientist at Google.
Hi, my name is Sami Benjio. I am a research scientist and lead of machine learning research group at Apple.
Hi, I'm Rogerio Bonatti. I'm a senior researcher at Microsoft. I think the most junior here in person. And I joined Microsoft about 1 year ago, and I work in robotics and machine learning.
Hi, everyone. I'm connecting remotely from Silicon Valley. I'm Fanny. I'm a principal research engineer manager at Microsoft, and my work is architecting the infrastructure and the ecosystem to run large-scale AI models, looking at the different strategies to optimize the execution, either to improve performance through throughput improvements or reducing latency and other different metrics. I'm very happy to join this panel remotely.
Hi, I'm David Ware. I'm a senior research scientist at Apple, and I work on efficient machine learning on device.
Hi, everyone. My name is Pablo Castro. I'm a distinguished engineer at Microsoft, and I work on mostly information retrieval. I manage the cognitive search, the Azure cognitive search team here at Microsoft.
My name is Sky Davi. I'm a PhD student at Texas A&M University.
Okay, I think that is everybody. So I'm going to move to a question. So we'll start off with some career questions. What are some mistakes you've made in your career, and how did you learn from them? Does anyone virtually want to take this? I might pick on Fanny.
Yeah, sure. So the career mistakes, what I have learned from that. I think that's a very interesting question because it's such a personal experience, and it changes about how you see your career progression and what you see as a mistake. I think on my personal take is I felt that as coming from a PhD school, coming from a PhD training, there is always this notion that the investment of time on the PhD, it's such a long time frame comparing to just going straight to the industry and then progress your career on the industry instead of going through the PhD. There is this pay of time that one does when goes through the PhD. So one of the recurring issues that I have seen, and including myself, is after the PhD, you just want to catch up with the time. You just want to really, really progress your career as fast as you can because you felt that you are in disadvantage to where you would have landed if you wouldn't have gone to PhD. And I think that's a mistake, at least on my experience, because from one end, I think having a PhD gives you a very unique skill sets that will propel you on your career, maybe not making this comparison between staying on industry comparing to go to the grad school. It's kind of unfair because it's two different paths of execution. So it's kind of hard to make it to land it to the same level. I do believe the PhD has a good training that will prepare you to be a very highly skilled, having a very highly level of skill sets to be good at particularly the position that you have. So for me, that was kind of my learning to kind of pause and think a little bit about what I want to do in my career instead of just running to try to catch up. I think you want to be very, very mindful about where you want to take your career. And one of the things that you want to do at early stages in your career is learn a lot about the spectrum. The spectrum is huge, and at least in my experience coming from a PhD, my experience was specifically on my area of research. And my area of research can be applicable to many different areas. So it's good to expand your knowledge to see what other career paths you can consider. And after that, you can actually be more mindful about your career progression. So that will be my take on that.
Thank you so much. Does anybody want to add to that?
I have something relatively similar. When I started my career, it was mostly computer science and neural networks. And I only realized later that I needed to be much better than I was in math. Actually, math is at the core of everything we do. And it was not clear when I started. And so I would encourage everyone to put more effort in math, any kind of math. They're all important, much more than I thought at the beginning of my career.
Yeah, I can just say I'm not sure about the mistakes I've made, but the first job that I got right after PhD was working for Nokia, and I worked there only 3 days because they shut down the whole operation. So be careful about what you're choosing.
Yeah, so I also wanted to just make a quick comment about maybe a class of mistakes that a lot of you who are in grad school might be facing, which is not failing fast enough. Because it's oftentimes in research, we try to go into some direction, and it can take many months for you to even understand that that direction maybe is not going to be very, very productive. So it's good to be able to identify, what are the minimal set of hypotheses that I have to prove or disprove to show that this has some future, and hopefully you can spend maybe a few weeks rather than many months into some new direction. So it's a mistake we often make in grad school and even research.
Okay, I'll move to the next question. This one's really more just about your organization. If you want to give some input on what it's like working at your company.
There's a wide array of answers when we work in a large company like Apple. So in terms of research, there is a lot of applied research that tries to improve products, and there's a large set of products at Apple that people work on, and then the team I'm working on is more fundamental long-term research objectives. So the kind of research we do is not necessarily to improve any product in the short term, but think about bigger problems in the long term. So overall, I think there's a very, very large set of problems and approaches that big companies like Apple have to deal with every day.
I feel very similarly about Microsoft, where there's a whole spectrum from in Microsoft research. We have basic research as well as kind of a lot of applied research work, and then there is Microsoft works in a variety of industries. So you get all these kind of more applied groups that have maybe a narrower agenda, like there is a product to improve versus just improving generally the state of the art. So we see both options where, like, I think I can really connect with the previous point, where we see room for kind of open-ended research where, if you want to explore and break new ground, there is room there. And then, as you work on more like product-oriented work, what I find interesting about that is you don't get to set the agenda. Like the agenda is kind of set by the goals of the product. So sometimes you get pulled into problems that maybe you would have not picked, or you didn't think you were interesting at first, and they turn out either interesting intrinsically, or they're interesting because when you look at the context where they are applied, all of the time you see kind of either how many people it impacts, or how much it enables something else to happen that would have not happened otherwise, and so on.
And if I can add a little bit now that we're talking about Microsoft, that I'm also coming from Microsoft, I think I fully agree with Pablo's statement about that there is so many different spectrum of work that you can do it. But on top of that, if at some point in your career you want to switch gears and not continue your path of research and switch gears to engineering, or vice versa, from engineering and applied research to research, I think the company has a lot of freedom for you to shape your own career. There is not a single line. You can actually switch and see what you want to learn. There's a lot of opportunity for that. And I feel that's very, that nourish a lot your talent, right? So I really like that about Microsoft, and I'm sure many other companies have similar experience.
Thanks so much. Okay, my next question, I guess this would just be for the audience. What, in your opinion, does a successful job candidate, either in machine learning as a researcher or someone who's an engineer, what do they kind of have to look like? If you have any kind of constructive comments or feedback that you'd like to share.
So I think maybe I'm the only one from academia, and so maybe I can say a little bit about that. Um, so I think one of the main things that we look at is whether there's a theme into what a person is doing. Like, is it just a set of papers put together, or it is like, a line of research? That is one of the main important things that I think is very, very important for being successful in academia. That might be in contrast with some of the things that the panelists said about, widening your, your field. Another very, very important thing for academia is your letters, which again may not be, something that people look at in industry. Like, they have their own process of, hiring and interviews and, coding, which is, I think, quite different. I've seen both sides, and I think the process is very different.
On my side, when I'm hiring people for my team, I'm looking at two different objectives. One is looking at the person, what they have done, and you can look at their publications, how it is impacting the field, how they are collaborating with others, with who is building on their work. So basically what they have done. But the second very important angle that I look for is, what do they bring to my team? I'm looking for building a team that is going to be diverse, that is going to have multiple views of the world, because our team is doing bottom-up research, so we need to have many people with different views, no matter whether it's their origin, what they've done, how they see the world, and that depends on who I already have to decide what's important and who I will then look for. So.
Yeah, I also have a comment from the perspective of even the applicant. So I joined Microsoft about 1 year ago. And something that was very helpful to me as a candidate, and also to the team that was evaluating me, was doing internships in industry. So I did a couple internships during my PhD. One of them was with Microsoft, with the team that ended up hiring me later on. And I think it's a very, very important thing to do, because you can see how that team operates, if it is the right fit for you. And it also gives the team a lot more time to evaluate you and your work as well. So that's a very helpful thing to do in your applications, or before the applications.
I would add that, like, with a very kind of more industry side bias. I don't work on the academia side, and I'm not well versed on that. But on the industry side, a couple of things that I also look for. I really like the point made before of we usually, when you're talking to a team, the manager hiring for that team is probably looking for rounding up the team in terms of a good mix of different talents, and also they're gonna unless the team is brand new, they're gonna look for, well, how there's a culture position on the team and a way of execution, and hopefully they're transparent around that, and if not, I would encourage you to ask questions about that, so you can see, are you going to fit in the dynamic of the team, how the team works, how do they collaborate, and so on. The other thing I tend to look for is a good balance between the kind of abstract problem solving combined with execution. I would characterize this as bias for action. When things need to be done, in the end, we all as members of teams, in the end, we work on building things. So bias for action, kind of like the ability to sit down, execute, build whatever it is that you're working on building quickly and effectively, is a huge differentiator.
Thank you. All right. I'm going to look for the crowd to see do any of you have any questions for our panelists?
I apologize because this is probably more exclusive to me because of the situation I'm in. So I'm in a gap year right now. So I was wondering what the best course of action to do if you're not associated or affiliated with an institution or job career network in order to do research, or is there a method of contacting in which I could explain how I could add value? Because I understand that they're not just going to take a random person onto the team. Or what do you think is some credibility factors that I could add on right now to speed up my process?
Well, I think no matter where you are, I think what matters is what you've done or what you're doing. So showing what either that you can reproduce some of the important work that you care about, and or even go further, showing your code, showing papers, showing things that you are able to do is definitely what matters the most. It's not wherever you work for.
And I concur with that. I think it's about your experience and what is your skill sets. And it doesn't matter where you are right now, this moment, you can showcase different projects that you have done at. Even if you're on a gap year, right, probably you have some interest on different projects, and there is tons of resources online about different competitions, about different open sources programs and projects that you can join and be an active participant. I think what probably a hiring manager will look for, at least from my end, when I'm a hiring manager, is look at, right, what are the particular interests of the candidate and how that interest aligns to the position that I have. So if there is a good alignment, then it doesn't matter where you are on your career path.
Okay, there are one question for Maria J. Anderson. So, what was the most difficult thing or aspect that you faced when starting your journey in CS, machine learning, and how did you overcome it?
So the question was, what's the most difficult thing decision you've taken when starting your career? I think the I guess an important decision is what do you want to work on? What is going to be special about what you work on? There's an easy tendency to go where there's a lot of people already because it looks shiny and nice, and it's hard to get further from the big wave. Today it's large language models. Yesterday, I don't know, it was something else. But this is a dangerous position to take because there are also going to be thousands of other people doing the same thing. So being different, finding your place in a very crowded place is hard. So the difficult decision now, to go back to that, is to find something that is important to do, but where there's not a lot of people working on today, so that you have a chance to actually succeed in having an impact. That's not an easy thing to do, and most of us fail to do it, but it's important.
Yes, to add to that, at least like in academia, when you're a PhD student and then maybe later a postdoc, there's always someone that if you make a mistake, that person is responsible. But when you become like a professor, then you are responsible for almost anything. And no one taught you that. Like, it's a lot of cold water in the beginning. And that was one of the hardest things that I had to learn.
Okay, I have another question from David Guzman. If someone would like to pursue a PhD in machine learning, do you think that it's better to apply directly to a PhD program, or maybe get a little bit of industry experience in machine learning before going to into a PhD?
I think in practice, the field of machine learning is getting so crowded and there are so many applicants. Now, as you said, there's a huge wave of people trying to do the same thing, that you kind of end up needing some experience to be able to get into PhD programs. And this experience can be in many forms. Can be in doing research as an undergrad, or going to a master's program, or taking a year to go to industry and do research projects. But I think almost invariably you need some sort of experience to be able to even get into a PhD, even though it's a little counterintuitive because you should be learning how to do proper research in the PhD, but you actually need to have some research experience before you get there. So that's my practical recommendation.
One thing I would be careful of, though, is to start quote proper job and get a large salary, and then think you're going to be able to come back to earning less. So there's a danger when you start in an industry position to not being able to actually go back to how you were living as a student. So if you're not sure, I think starting the PhD as soon as you can, and sometimes you can't do it quickly, is the best, because the more you wait, the harder it is.
Yeah, I agree with everything they said. I think when we look at the PhD applicants, we tend to look at their experiences, and certainly if they have, related experiences in companies, that's very valuable. I should say though that there is another extreme that we see people apply with 5 papers, like out of bachelor. That is another extreme. And that is also alarming. So I think, having a balance is very important, right? So usually these people who have a lot of papers, they don't have a high GPA. And that is way more important than having like 5 papers.
Yeah, I can add on top of that. Yeah, I fully concur to that if we waited a little longer, it gets harder to join the PhD. In my personal experience, I went to the industry after my bachelor, and I worked as a software engineer for a few years, and then going back to grad school, the shocking of the salary was a really dramatic adjustment on my end that definitely made me question if I was doing the right call to go to grad school. So I think one would like to the risk or reduce that kind of transition. I would recommend going straight forward, because I think it has a nice transition, and it's better to continue that path. Also gives you a sense that if you go through a bachelor right now, there is a tons of opportunities that at least now I'm more aware of that when I was doing my bachelor, to do research, not necessarily to publish a paper, but at least to be part of a research lab. So you can actually participate and get some mentorship from PhD students, something that my research lab did in the past, or is still doing right now, is pair a PhD student and an undergraduate student to help them to have some experience on research. And I think that will go very well on their portfolio when they are an applicant for a PhD program. The fact that they have an experience on it, they know what they are fine-tuning. On top of that, being a part of a research lab gives you a sense about what kind of research spectrum you would like to dive deeper, which I think is very much important for your grad school. I think besides which school and which college you would like to go, it's much more important which research lab and who is going to be your advisor for it. So having a little bit of research experience will help you narrow down and have a much successful experience overall in the journey.
Okay, I'm gonna go for another question. So this is my question to all of you. How do you search for mentors, both either in academia or in industry? And do you still look for mentors, or are you a mentor? I mean, likely all of you are mentors, but if you can shed some light on that.
I definitely, I think maybe that is one of the most important things that you can do, find the right person to learn from. And that has had tremendous effects on my career and still does. Whenever I still look up to people that I get inspired by. And I think that is super energizing. And if you find the right person or right people, I think they can give you correct directions, not necessarily what is the hottest topic. It is like, as you said, it's, this old saying that, a good player is the one that knows where the ball is. When, we were talking about soccer, a great player is the one who knows where the ball will be, right? And I think mentors can have that role.
So there are many mentoring opportunities. If you work in a large companies, often they organize mentoring sessions, and so they try to match more experienced researchers with more junior ones within the organization. I think also organizations like WIML and maybe LatinX, I don't know, organize mentoring sessions for us, and I think it's a great idea. But otherwise, if you don't see around you such an opportunity, I think you should go ahead and think about the people who you find most people who you think are doing the right thing. They do the right research, they do it the right way, they are people you really want to talk to. Well, engage with them. First, come to these conferences. They are normal humans, you can talk to them and they will they will likely answer, and you can start this conversation that can go very well. You can send them emails, some respond. I do. So don't hesitate to look around you in these conferences. There are plenty of great people you should talk to.
Yeah, I think these are great answers, and I just wanted to add a quick orthogonal comment, which is there are different types of mentors that you can have. Some of these mentors are in the sense of they're people who come from a similar background, who have achieved things that maybe you didn't see that were possible coming from your background. I've certainly had mentors that were mentors in this sense for me. There are other mentors who actually coach you and guide you, give you maybe a philosophy for you to do your own thing. So there are mentors in different spaces, and you should look for different kinds of mentors as well. It's not a single person that will fulfill all types of mentorship for you. There are mentors in different areas.
And if may I add on that, so I think I concur with all the message before. I think it's very important to have a mentor, and I think mentor, it's kind of hard sometimes to find, and I think the rings of mentorship helps a lot, and I know LatinX has a good ring of mentorship. But also once you join a company, there is different experience to do it. But also in the interaction, sometimes you will find a person that you think that you admire, you think that they are doing the right thing, as Sammy was saying, then just don't hesitate to reach out. At the same time, there is this notion of having a mentor and a champion, and you want both, right? You want a champion, a person that when you are not in the room, he or she can advocate for you. He and she can actually back you up. I think that's very important for you and your career. So try to find that. And sometimes you get your mentor and your champion on the same person, sometimes you're not. But it's good to have all of that. So with that note, unfortunately, I have to drop. I have to join another call, but it was a pleasure to join this call, and please continue with the mentorship. Thank you.
I have a question probably following on this point. Given that you mentioned about mentorship and in the context of the World Cup, where the ball will be, I would like to ask you, what project do you think you will work in the future? If you can choose a project right now in your individual field, to the extent you can share, of course, what will you work in the following months or years?
This is never an easy answer. There are many open problems today, and we all have a very different research background, so there will be as many different answers as we are. I personally think that there's a lot of advances. For instance, we hear about these large models, but we don't understand much of what is happening. So investing more in understanding what is happening in many ways, what are the limits, what are the risks, what they cannot do, can they do even more? So trying to answer questions and not just build models and see what happens is going to be very important in the future. But that's only one direction. Of course, there's also everything about, as machine learning gets more and more into our products, are we sure that they are safe? Are we sure that it's good for everyone, that it's fair? These questions are not new, but they are more and more relevant and important.
I should add something about, I just remember the quote that I heard a few weeks ago on a podcast that was about mentorship. And the guy said that, do the great work and the right mentor will find you, which is a little bit counterintuitive. The second thing is that, at least in my own research, I question usually a lot of things that we assume they are correct. even like the theory of learning as we know it. And so usually my research is we go back like 30 years and we look what, why we took a left turn instead of the right turn and build up again. So my own research is very theoretical, and that is the nature of it. And I'm very drawn about understanding, as Sammy said, about why things work. And very often we don't even understand why simple things work, let alone these huge models. And that is what I'm trying to understand, some simple things.
I'll share perspective on my side. So for me, as someone that works more in the kind of industry, kind of product side, so I work on search, kind of information retrieval space, and on this whole wave of large language models and kind of related advancements, like really disrupted the assumptions of what you can or cannot do, or how much data do you need to do something reasonably well. On one hand, it opened the door for a lot more people to try and kind of create applied solutions with these technologies. On the other hand, like this is a much broader audience that maybe won't have the rigor that folks that have worked in this space for a long time will have when it comes to validating that these things are robust, that they're not. The cherry-picked scenario is awesome, but the rest are all kind of questionable quality when they go to customers. So one area that I can see my teams kind of spending a lot of time on moving forward is kind of how do we take all this huge amount of innovation that has happened in the last few years and kind of apply it in the wild in ways that is safe, that is predictable, and it can yield well understood outcomes for end users. And this has been something that recently has been super evident with things like these large language models support kind of prompts as ways of interaction where it feels too informal, like just the prompts won't do. You want the rigor for validation and whatnot, even though it feels sometimes easy to iterate and on getting some answers from the model. I mean, that's an area where I feel that we are at a stage where we are discovering all these amazing behaviors. We don't fully understand them yet. And as part of not fully understanding them, not only there's the curiosity of, well, how do they work? Why do they work the way they do? But also there's this other implication of well, if we don't understand them well, or we cannot predict their outcomes well, where is it appropriate to apply these models in places where they'll touch millions of people out there, and where maybe we don't understand them well, and maybe there are methods that are more mature, more appropriate for the context. So in general, I'm very curious about this path forward of how are we going to apply the huge amount of kind of change that we're seeing in the space, particularly natural language processing and related stuff right now.
Hey, usually students also ask me questions about this. I wanted to get your advice. So when they are looking for a job, and we know mentorship is important, and this and getting the right background and the right motivation and finding that space that you want to work on. But then we also know that meeting people like in this conference, the NeurIPS, it's huge also to make those connections. But the question is from your personally, what has worked for you when someone approaches you, like that first conversation? How did they approach you that made an impact? Was it a joke, or telling you this is a great paper, that I admire you? What works for you guys? That'll be my question.
Yeah, I can talk. No, I haven't hired anybody for full-time positions, but I have been involved in the recruiting of interns for our research team. And it really makes a difference when you see that somebody is, maybe level 0 is a person just sends an application online, but we can go well beyond that if you, for example, approach somebody at a conference or send a very well-crafted email where you say, I saw, hi, this is my, kind of a one paragraph, few lines of your background, talk about some paper that is relevant that the group published, and say, I sent my application, but I really like this area of work. I saw that you folks published this particular paper. I have worked on this problem before. I had this experience. I have these questions. It's just something that shows that you're generally interested in that topic, that you understand it, that you want to do that research. And it's such a easy thing to do, to just send an email, and so few people do it. And I think it makes a huge difference when we are evaluating candidates, when we're trying to understand if they're truly interested in the position, or if they just applied to 20 positions online and are just going to get whatever internship they accepts them.
Yeah, I agree. I think being as personal as possible, so making sure that they have read about your work and your research interest and your group, and that they show genuine interest in being part of that in any way that can be.
I think particularly for a conference like ICML and NeurIPS, what I see that, or maybe that is my experience, when I was a student and now that I'm not a student, what sometimes make a difference is that if the person says, I liked your paper on X, and they know more than the abstract of the paper, I think that's a difference. Like, if they just read the abstract, I think the conversation is not going to go beyond that. But if they know more than the abstract, and usually they actually have some interesting insight about the paper, it can really go very far. And so there is a superficial, I think, superficially knowing something or really trying to know something. I think that makes a difference. Makes a huge difference.
Okay, this next question is just for me, it's been something that I've been thinking about, and I'm sure all of you have. We've been thinking a lot about fairness and bias, even just within our hiring. And so recently in my organization, we had some of our senior leaders talk about a time where they hired someone that originally they weren't going to, but then they realized that maybe they wanted to take a chance, or they gave the example of someone who had an accent, and then they realized that didn't pay any attention to the actual job, and it was the best decision they made. Do you have any experiences that are similar that you'd like to share? Or, for those of you who don't have hiring authority, if you have just any sort of experience kind of similar.
It's clear that we always have to be careful about our own biases, about the kind of people we know, and it's much easier to hire other people that look the same as the people we know, because we know exactly how they're going to behave, so it's easy. But actually, what is much more important is to bring things that are different to your team, so things that you don't know, people that have different ways to see the world or behave in the world. So this, I must say, is an ongoing effort. We will never get it right. Every day I have to question myself about, for hiring purposes, am I actually looking at the right angle? Am I missing people just because, for instance, they don't have publications at NeurIPS, but maybe they have good publications somewhere else? That's one angle that I need to be careful of, because it's one of my biases. So there's it's very, very hard to do the right thing every time. You're going to make mistakes. So that's the first thing. Acknowledge that you are going to make mistakes. It's going to help you through them, and ask questions about these decisions around. Don't do it quickly. Any decision that you take too quickly will be biased. Take your time. Look at the other angle. Are you sure this is not the right person? Why is this person better than that? Are you asking the right questions? That helps, but it's not an easy thing.
I would add one practice that folks at the kind of the recruiting team at Microsoft help us kind of think about is whenever we're starting to hire for a new position, they'll sit down with us, whoever is the hiring manager, and they'll ask, tell me exactly what you really need for this position. I mean, versus, what are the growth paths? What are the things people are going to learn on the job? Those things are all great. But let's start with what are the things that people need to be successful at starting on their job? I found that to be a great exercise in kind of separating the things that you have preference for, but just because it's your style or it's the experience so far, so you're comfortable with that, versus the things that are truly like, if someone doesn't have this experience or this background or hasn't done work in this problem domain, then they just, they would struggle on the job, and that, that's, you probably do someone a disservice if you bring them in. But then there is all these other things that, just out of inertia, when we create like a job description and we list the requirements, we say, well, I would love the person to have this and that and that. And they really make us stop and think about like, why are you asking this? Like, is this really part of what you're looking for? And that's a simple practice that like it does force you to kind of stop and think for a minute. And as a result, when you kind of narrow that down, you just broaden the kind of the addressable pool of candidates that you could be talking to. It has been super effective.
So actually I have two questions, not related. So when you start, like after your PhD and you start mentoring maybe students or interns or like very early on in your career, how do you approach that? Are you very hands-on and you are like constantly paying attention to the student because that feels like the natural thing, or are you more lay off and like make your own mistakes? And second question, unrelated, is how do you approach actually getting papers published into these conferences? So how do you, sometimes it's difficult to break this, ICML, NeurIPS ceiling. So what are your recommendations on that?
Yeah, I can go first. So I've had experience mentoring a few people during grad school, kind of younger students or master students, a few undergrads, and now I've had a chance to mentor people as interns at Microsoft. I would say, during grad school, it was a bit more hands-on because I was mentoring people who were involved directly in my projects, and they were doing essential aspects. So I was also very interested in the outcome of those projects to be successful directly. So I was much more hands-on. With interns, I try to be way more hands-off. Something I really expect from interns is ownership of their projects. Maybe the way I approach it is I am as available as they ask, but I expect them to ask for help, for maybe on the theory aspect, on the definition of the problem. But I want them, the interns, to come to me and ask those things because I want ownership from their part. But that's my personal style. There are people who are more hands-on, who are much more actively involved. But I think it's not this strategy does not scale well. If you have many more interns, many more people who report to you. So that's what I think.
On my side, I like to have to change my mind over time. So at the beginning, I think it's very important that the person you start working with, the intern or the junior person that works with you, that they feel secure about what they're going to do. So you're available, you help them, you make sure that their project is well defined, and you meet with them as many times as you want, as they want, many times a week if needed. But as you see that they are taking more ownership, I think it's good to let them take more risk and space your meetings with them. But if you do that from the beginning, you might it might make a big mistake because you might not see them enough and not see the big mistakes they've done from the beginning, and that would be very disheartening for them. So vary the amount of hands-on you are from the beginning to the end. As for the paper thing, we all want to know how do we publish paper. No, but I would say first, I know that reviewer 2 is not good, but but you should still think he's good or she's good. Reviewers do their best to give you the comments about how to improve your paper. Do that. Improve your papers thanks to what they say and submit it again to the next conference. It's going to get better. And one day it's going to get accepted, despite reviewer 2.
Yeah, there's always another conference, I think, right? And they're growing. So There are more and more. I think regarding the mentorship, I very much agree with Sammy that I usually, when someone starts their PhD with me, I give them a problem that I know how to solve, but I want them to solve. So I know if I sit down 2 weeks, I can prove it, or I have the skeleton of the proof in my head. As we go along, usually they get to the point that I don't know how to do it. They don't know how to do it. And the most interesting projects are those projects, right? And also 90% of the time they fail. And that's part of, I think, doing creative research is that very often they fail. It's not true what you think is true. But once it is true, and that is only 10%, I think it's worth it.
Thanks. Hi. I have a question regarding reconciling kind of this new trend of slow science with how that plays out for underrepresented groups. It's kind of, I can see that it can have both a positive and negative effect on potentially reducing the gatekeeping in kind of the resources that entail getting a paper published, but also when it comes to, students needing to graduate, especially students that already had a very hard time getting into grad school. What's your thought on how this might play out in the future, especially for kind of the public of this workshop?
I guess it's our role as mentors or supervisor or managers or whatever to make sure that we put enough effort into everyone around us, students, mentoree, team member, that they can succeed. So if that means sometimes putting more effort for some other people, yeah, I think it shouldn't be on the underrepresented person or on anyone to have to feel that. So if that doesn't work, it's our fault, and we should just do better and taking more time. I don't think there should be any difference in the result. There might be more work so that it happens, but I think it's on us to make sure it does. So if we are not doing a good job, please tell us.
There is certainly, I think, a shift in the way that I see how things are going, at least from the applicants that we receive. One of the main things is that many people, including myself and many people here, they all have the imposter syndromes. And they just don't think that they should apply. And that is changing. And that makes a difference. And we see that in our applicants, and there are more and more. And hopefully, venues like this is going to fuel that, you can apply, you can get in, and you can publish.
Hello, my name is Rogelio, and I want to ask about, for you, is there a importance of from which school comes the guy who is trying to apply for a job or some kind like that? If the name of the school is important for you, like if it is coming for a big school like Harvard or MIT, and if the response is yes, what do you think is the difference between the guys who apply for big institutions compared to guys who are coming from public institutions from maybe Latin American countries or something like that? Is there an importance for you?
Yeah, I can give the answer for how it impacts for example, the recruiting process for internships, for research interns. What I try to do is to, I guess as a human, we have biases, and it's not that we don't look, I don't close my eyes when I go over the school from the applicant. But what I try to do to reduce this bias is to look a lot at the publications that this candidate has. if he or she has publications that are relevant to the topics that we have in our research group, then I think to me that has a way higher weight than what the school that they're coming from. So looking at the actual work done and not where they did that work. To me, that's the most important.
I agree, but I think we have to admit that if you come from a big lab, there will be more opportunities for you to have published than if you come from a university where there was not a big champion to help you publish the right papers. So even if we try to do the right thing, it's going to be harder, unfortunately. So let's admit that.
Also, in defense of public universities, I think, right there. I study in a public university. I did not even study in the U.S. So I think there are a couple of answers to your question. I think it makes a difference where the person graduated, but it's like any other thing. It's one feature in, if you want to vectorize that person. And there are many other features. Like one of the most important things that, at least into getting into faculty position, is that who was the advisor. And people, there are many great advisors around the world, and people appreciate them a lot, and that is, I think, and they can, advisors can have a huge influence, right, on how you do research, what kind of research you do, what is your taste, all sorts of things.
Just had a quick addition to my answer as well. No, just even from I did my undergrad in Brazil, and for example, in my lab there, we had, for my first research project, it was at the end of my freshman year, we had, for example, $1,000 for funding of 1 to 2 years of my research project. And no, it's like, if you compare to how much funding American schools have, or how much funding the private institutions have here, it's just ridiculous. Like how little money I had to fund that research project. So if anything, if you see that somebody has published good work and comes from a public school, especially like outside of the U.S., then it's almost like a positive weight towards that data sample, that despite all the difficulties of lack of funding, lack of encouragement, they were able to get something good out. So that's even more impressive, in my opinion.
Thank you so much. We're at time. I just would love to give a huge round of applause to our panel. Yes.